Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
A friend of mine owns a bar. He has 4 CCTV cameras. Only one of those cameras points to the bartending area where he can see the actions of his employees. I am there having a beer, it's early 5 p.m. and I'm the only one, when I see the employee go into the back room and then comes out. Something seems off. The guy is a bit strange. The guy asks me, "So, you know Dean, the bar owner, pretty good?" He goes, "Yeah, I just helped Dean install a brand new CCTV system in the bar." I know this is a lie cause Dean and I installed those cameras together. I go, "Yeah, that's cool. How many cameras?" 4. He goes, "Yeah, all high def." This was a bit strange to me. Why are we talking about this? Then I noticed him slipping money from the register into his pocket. I called him out on this nonsense. He says, "Dude, Dean makes plenty of cash. How about this? I'll give you $20 and we call it cool." I fire back, "Give me 40. He goes, "Alright." I then say, "Hey man, let me buy you a drink." So we have a drink and I congratulate him on his little scheme. I then say, "Gotta go for a smoke." It's around 6 p.m. and I call Dean up and say, "Dean, your bartender is stealing cash from you. Your 5th CCTV camera caught him. Pretty sure he turned off the other cameras." Dean thanks me and says to keep him busy until he gets there. So I go back in and we start crap talking Dean. And then Dean walks in with 2 lovely police officers and Dean immediately says, "Get out from behind the bar. The cops are all here to arrest you for theft." The bartender fired back, "Dude, I didn't steal, and you don't have any proof." To which Dean responded, "You turned off the 4 CCTV cameras, but you don't know about my hidden one." Guy is told to sit put by one officer as another officer goes back and reviews the footage. It's clear as day this guy is stealing, and he ends up getting arrested. Bartender is currently awaiting trial. His case should be open and shut. Dean refused to take the $40 back from me, and I got my tab for free that night. This incident blew up in March 2021, in the middle of lockdowns and stuff. It will probably be recognizable to people I work with. Hopefully they don't treat this threat. It's a story about someone whose ambition was bigger than their ethics and the law, and it comes back to bite them. At the time I was working as a manager in a mid-sized business. While I was there, I was assigned a new member to my team. I will call her Evil. Evil was in her mid-20s and was pretty fresh out of college. She was the kind of person who could talk your ear off about all of her ideas and plans and what she was working on, but never really seemed to have anything to show for it. When I talked to her about clients complaining that she wasn't getting back to them, she would always have an excuse about how difficult they were, how snowed under she was, and how she had written an email but it must have gotten lost in spam, so on and so forth. Basically, never her fault. It got to the point where after one of our monthly meetings, I called her in and explained that if she couldn't get her tasks done, she needed to let us know so we could help delegate resources to make sure things weren't slipping through the cracks. I'll admit, I was pretty direct. Her performance was impacting the whole team, and my job was literally to keep the team on track. I get that people can be under pressure, that there can be stuff going on at home which impacts work, and that sometimes people need a bit of help. But every time I ask about a project, you say, Yep, everything's good. I've got it under control." And then it all falls apart and your only response is to blame the client. We have a problem. I explained that I wasn't going to start formal performance management or anything like that, but from now on I'd like her to check in with me on Monday mornings for 10 minutes to go over objectives for the week and to check if she needed support with any of her clients. I know it isn't fun to be micromanaged, so I tried to keep these check-ins short and mostly just offer assistance on stuff. She clearly hated my guts though, and apparently was hatching her own pro-revenge. Now, part of my role included use of a purchasing card, which wasn't in my name but I had access to. I was given the card to basically make small purchases for the office or spend up to $500 on clients. The card was kept in an office I shared with another team manager where we both could access it when we needed it. One day I get a call from accounts asking about a few abnormal purchases on a card, a Photoshop subscription, a couple of Uber Eats orders, an HBO subscription, and so on. I say I don't know anything about them and they should check with the other team manager. Apparently, the other team manager did not know anything about them either because after the weekend, I get called into the big boss's office. After my colleague and I had denied involvement, accounts had started calling Adobe and Uber and stuff to find out where the transactions were coming from. They said that not only were the accounts in my name, they were registered to an email address with my name in it too. Example, or.roll3@domain.com or something. I can't describe what it felt like to be in that meeting. I felt physically sick. I couldn't work out what was happening. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was about to get fired and I couldn't understand how that was even possible. The director was going on about how access to the card was a privilege and that I had signed an agreement about appropriate use and so on and so forth. I denied that I had been using it inappropriately, and the boss listened, but I could tell he wasn't that convinced. To be honest, in my head, I was gaslighting myself and worrying that I had somehow saved the card in Google and maybe my wife had been accidentally using it or something. It was terrible. And I found myself apologizing and saying, I don't know how this happened. I assure you that I know that none of those expenses are appropriate uses of company funds. There must have been some kind of mistake. Can I please have the details and look into it? And so on and so forth. When I finally got out of that office, job was still intact, barely. Evil was waiting for me in my office door. She was grinning from ear to ear and sweetly explained she had been waiting for our morning meeting. I told her something had come up and we'd do the meeting tomorrow. And she said, "Oh, will you be in tomorrow?" Confused because I didn't know I was in a pro-revenge thread at the time, I just replied, "Yes, why would I not be in tomorrow?" She just sipped her tea and said, "Oh, no reason," turned around and went back to her desk. Something felt off, but I was still worrying about what had happened with the boss, so I spent the next couple of hours calling my wife, calling Adobe and doing the same legwork that accounts had done. It became very obvious that someone had been using my name and the company card to spend a bunch of money online. Had I been hacked or something? Personal information on a dark web and these hackers just really wanted Photoshop and Wendy's delivered? It was the Uber Eats that was her undoing. After getting on a phone and talking through what had gone on, and obviously giving my name for the account and everything, the fellow on the phone told me where the food had been delivered. It was in our city, which made me rule out straight away any notion of my data being sold online or something. Now I was suspicious and pissed. I don't like to think the worst of people, but now I was. Listening to my gut, I pulled up Evil's employee information and checked her address. I pulled it up on Google Maps, dropped a pin on her place and then looked for the address Uber Eats had given me. It was a corner of her FM block. I was furious. When she left work for the day, I got IT to give me access to her laptop. Sure enough, when I opened up her domain.com account, under her listed accounts was word.roll3@domain.com. There were some things she had been smart about. The IP address she had been using was the office, which would have tied back to me. She had even had the food delivered to a different address. She had even made a fake email address, but saving her passwords on a work computer was a mistake. I called the boss that night and explained what I had found, and kept the IT guy with me to support the fact that I hadn't just logged into her computer and made it all up. The next day the boss called her into the office and fired her so bad there were red trucks lining up outside the building. When she teary-eyed left his office, I made sure I was standing in the hall sipping a cup of coffee. It had gotten cold while I waited for her, but still tasted sweet. I hope she went home that night because if she did, she would have received some nice goodbye Wendy's delivered by Uber Eats, paid for on my personal card of course. Revenge and justice can be the same thing, right? In the end, she was fired. The boss apologized and we were on good terms when I left in October for a new gig. She never apologized and I haven't seen her since. The boss decided not to get the police involved, and neither did I. Just didn't want the hassle. Okay, so just a little bit of information before I get into the story. Also, sorry this might get a little long, but I hope it's worth it. I, 22 male, work construction and run a few crews, and I'm a foreman because I've been working in this field since I started working summers when I was 14. That's legal in my state. With this being said, I have a lot of experience and get paid really well. For my job, I need a truck that can pull a lot of trailers and also get into a lot of sketchy job sites, especially in the winter. So I drive a new lifted pickup F350. Anyways, let's get into it. So about 4 months ago now, I got off work one day, just really didn't feel like making dinner. So I decided to go get myself the trusty Big Mac at McDonald's. Well, after I got my order, I was going to pull out into the parking lot to drive home and I was looking hard over to my left to see how busy the road was before I got over there. Well, I wasn't paying great attention to what was happening in front of me, and as I was creeping forward, someone who was in front of me was stopped and not paying attention either. I ended up barely hitting his mirror and scraping his door with my front end. I immediately reversed and hopped out. I made sure the guy was okay and apologized, knowing that it was my fault, and I asked him if he wanted to call the cops. Let's call him Brent. Brent says, "Nah bro, we're all good. If you just give me your insurance information, I think we can get this taken care of." I was fine with that as there was no damage done to my truck and it's not required to call the cops for an accident if it occurs in a private parking lot. This is relevant later. We exchange info and he seems pretty cool, so I tell him to go get the damage bid and I'll just pay in cash so my insurance rates don't go up as long as he's okay with it. He says that's fine and we both just leave, and I feel like a moron. But all in all, Brent seems like a cool dude and I just hope we can get it sorted out smoothly. About a month passes by and I haven't heard anything from Brent or the shop I told him to go to. Honestly, I wasn't too stressed about this because if he decided to not get it done, that's on him. Well, he calls me up one day about noon, saying he can't remember my name and he wanted to tell the guys at the shop who sent him there cause it seemed like we knew each other. I told him my name and the guys at the shop gave him a deal. Pretty sure they say this to everyone. He sends me the bid for damages and it comes out to $2,403. This was more than I imagined, but I said to get it done and I'd take care of the bill afterward, and that was that. He hung up and said it was cool and I went on with my day as usual. Another month goes by and I don't hear anything until Brent calls me up while I'm at work again and says, "Hey brother, I talked to the shop and they said they can get me in for another 2 weeks or so, and they may end up charging me more if they find more damage." I say, "Okay, sounds good, just let me know man. I hope it goes smooth for you and I'm sorry for the inconvenience." He seems to take it good and I'm really trying to just be a good person. He responds with, "Well, after talking to my wife, I'm okay if you just wanted to write a check for $2,500 and we can call it even." This seemed odd to me because why the hell wouldn't someone want their vehicle repairs all paid for? I say, "Okay man, let's set a time and place to meet and I'll get you paid." He liked the idea and ended the call by telling me he would let me know. Yet another month passes by and I hear nothing again. At this point I'm getting fed up and just want the situation to stop being over my head. He hits me up at 11 p.m. one night and asks if we can meet in town. I found this kind of disrespectful because I was nearly asleep and had to be at work at 5 a.m. the next day. Either way, I said that was fine and took my $2,500 cash and wrote up a quick contract saying this payment would be accepted as payment in full for the damages, and by accepting it, it would release me from any and all liability. This was a pretty fair contract, I believe, as it was a deal we had already made over the phone, just in writing. I get to the place we suggested as a meetup spot, I give him the cash and he signs the contract without hardly even reading it, and he didn't want a copy. This was a red flag to me, but I just assumed he really didn't care about it all that much, so I just sent him the photo of the contract and went back home for some beauty sleep. As you can guess by now, another month goes by with me just living life carefree and not a worry in the world about this stupid car accident. Well, I go to check my mail and I have a notice from this guy's lawyer that he's suing me for not paying after wrecking his car. This pissed me off, but I also knew I had plenty of text messages and a contract on my side. I immediately call Brent and he blocks my number. Luckily enough, my girlfriend works for a lawyer, so I get him updated and he says he'd love to help. He lets me know I saved myself by writing that contract, as any contract worth over $500 is to be held up in any level of court in my state. I immediately get to work on my revenge. I remember on the side of this guy's car he had a business logo and I took pictures of the damage. So I hop online and get to the BBB to look up who owns this company, thinking that surely he couldn't own the business because he's such an idiot. But I was wrong. This guy owns the company and I can see that he has about 12 one-star reviews, all in dispute because of his shady business practices, telling people that it will cost one thing and then charging them 4 times what he said it would. Sound familiar? Remember when he said the shop may charge more than the original $2,403? That's right, he was suing me for $10,000. 4 times what the shop told him it will cost. Unbelievable. He was trying his same sneaky crap on me. My lawyer takes note of this and we show up to court ready for war. This guy is sleazy. As we get there and all set up, he says, "You ready to give me more of daddy's money?" With a smirk. I guess just cause I'm young and drive a nice truck and could afford $2,500. His lawyer gets up and starts trying to say BS from me hitting and running, and Brent barely got a picture of my license plate, so I try bullying him into taking a deal for only $2,500 when the damage was clearly more than that. There were obvious holes in his story and he really didn't have much to say. Just imagine the smile on my face as my lawyer lays out the printouts of our text messages and a physical copy of the contract, which was signed by Brent. His lawyer was ghostly white and looked sick. After laying out all of the evidence, my lawyer pulled out a little hidden gem. The printouts of all the complaints we found on a BBB and how he was doing the same thing to me. That was a final nail in the coffin, as the judge said he had seen enough. He asked Brent for any final statements and Brent said, "I don't even have the $2,500 anymore. Can I just get that then and we will be okay?" Literally admitting to the judge that he had received my money and his story was just a load of horse crap. I thought his lawyer was going to strangle him. It was beautiful. The judge ended up ruling in my favor and demanded him to pay my legal fees as well as damages and lost wages because I had to miss work to be in court. The absolute sweetest part was that this particular day my crew was on a very high-wage job and I was technically the one getting paid before I paid them out as subcontractors. This means I was to be paid $475 an hour and this whole ordeal took about 5 hours. He ended up having to pay me almost $5,000. I don't think I've ever been so happy in my life. Sorry it was so long, I just really felt the need to share. Thank you to anyone who made it this far. Back in the days before unlimited mobile phone calling plans and long distance, I had a company paid flip phone. There were all kinds of fussy rules attached to using it. No texting, even though texting was free. No long distance calls, with one exception as I'll explain below. No special ringtones and no using the camera, like I said, fussy rules. And the one exception to the no long distance calls rule was for travel. In my job, I rarely would have to travel to a different calling area, i.e. roaming. But if I did, I was permitted one long distance call per day to call home. That's it. So the day came when I had to travel and stay overnight in a hotel for work. When I arrived at the hotel, I called my wife to let her know I arrived and spent a couple of minutes talking to my kids. Got some supper, did some work in front of the TV in the hotel room, and went to bed. The next day, while at the conference I was attending, I got a call from my home office. As I was in a large hotel, the call dropped so I had to call back. Didn't think anything of it. went back to my session, and enjoyed the speaker. Later, after I got back to the hotel, I called home to say goodnight to the kids. I got the answering machine and left a message. Didn't think anything of that either. The next day, I returned and went on with my life. At the end of the month, I got a call from finance. Brother P, it's finance supervisor. I am just reviewing your latest cell phone bill and it shows that an unauthorized long-distance call. Really? What was the date? April 3rd. You made a call to my office number at 9:20 a.m. Then another one to my home number at 6:15 p.m. Oh yeah, that's when I was at a conference. The first call was to me from the office, but I got cut off and had to call back. I called home from the hotel later. So how would you like to reimburse us for the call? I beg your pardon? The second call. You have to reimburse for the unauthorized long-distance call. You have an expense claim from the conference, so I can deduct it from that. Or you can pay directly. How much are we talking about? 10 cents? 10 cents? 10 cents. Would you like that deducted from your expense claim? I thought I was being punked. Seriously? I sat in stunned silence for a few moments. No, you know what? I'll pay you directly, I said, and wished the supervisor a pleasant day. I opened my drawer where I had some spare change, took 2 nickels, taped them to a sheet of 8.5 by 11-inch paper, and wrote, "For cell phone charge," in my name. I then took a company envelope, addressed it to the finance office in a different building walking distance away, folded the sheet of paper and put it in the envelope. I put the envelope in the outgoing mail tray, the postage for which would be paid by the company. A few days later, I got a call from the comptroller herself, 3 pay grades above me, and usually wouldn't interact with someone on my level. Apparently, the supervisor complained about me. What was the nickels? I explained the situation, told her the supervisor had insisted that I pay the 10 cents charge, and I complied. She laughed out loud. Paper, envelope, and postage had cost the company more than what they recovered. The following month, the finance department updated the cell phone policy. From then on, only long-distance charges in excess of $10 had to be reimbursed. A couple of years ago, I ordered an express parcel delivery from the UK to the USA via one of these third-party parcel shipping companies. For those who are unfamiliar, they are a middleman and they hold huge accounts with UPS, DHL, FedEx, and so on. They then offer cheaper parcel rates and pass some of this discount onto the customer. So I ordered an express 48-hour delivery with one of these delivery companies for my 2 parcels to the USA. This cost me around £100 for the 2 boxes, and from experience using this delivery company in the past, they have a delivery guarantee which offers me a full refund of all carriage charges if any part of the shipment is not delivered within 48 hours. A few days later, I was told by my customer that the boxes had arrived 2 days late. Not a problem. I checked the tracking number and it had been held up at the UK-based air freight terminal, which entitled me to a full refund of the carriage charges. I then contacted the delivery company, but I was told that although I was fully entitled to a full refund, I'd have to speak to the third-party shipping company. I contacted them by phone and I was told that they don't issue refunds for delayed parcels. I explained that this was a guaranteed service and the delivery company said that I was entitled to a refund. At this point, I was passed on to a manager by the call center operative without even asking. The manager was very obnoxious and wasn't bothered that my parcel had been delayed. In his opinion, I shouldn't expect it to get there on time when I had paid such a low price. So you want the full refund just because your parcel is delayed? Yes, I do, because that is what was in the terms and conditions. But you didn't buy the extra insurance. No, I didn't, because the delivery already included £1,000 of insurance anyway. Well, we don't do refunds for delayed parcels, and especially if you haven't paid for the insurance. At this point, I was getting pretty annoyed because he was making up this idea of buying insurance to cover for delays. The insurance only covered total loss and damage anyway. So I explained that if I didn't receive a refund, I would simply initiate a chargeback on my credit card for the payment. At this, he raised his voice and told me, "Fine, try to do a chargeback then. We will fight it and you won't get a refund." Yeah, your parcel was late, but that doesn't mean you get a free delivery. I ended the call and got straight on the phone to my credit card company. They went through a rigorous process with me and asked for a copy of the original invoice, the terms and conditions, and so on. Within 24 hours, they had refunded the full amount back to my card and sent me a letter giving me the reasons they found the chargeback in my favor. It also explained that the merchant, the shipping company, had 30 days to contest the chargeback. However, 30 days came and went and the money was still showing as refunded. 6 weeks later, I received an email from their customer service team telling me that they were willing to give me a partial refund of 10% to compensate me for the delay. Obviously, somebody hadn't realized that I'd initiated the chargeback and now it was too late. So I replied and politely explained that I was told by the manager stating his name to initiate the chargeback because their company doesn't issue refunds even when their terms and conditions say they do. Therefore, as far as I was concerned, the matter was now closed as my credit card company had given them 30 days to reply to the chargeback and they had not replied. Therefore, the chargeback was granted. Not only did I never hear anything back from them, but I haven't used this company since. Michigan has a law on its books that protects customers from being charged more than an item is priced due to a scanning error. If a customer is overcharged, they are entitled to 10 times the difference or $5, whichever is less on top of the difference. So if a customer is charged $5 for an item priced $4, they get $1 back plus another $5. The fee is to basically compensate the customer for the time and expense that's having to come back to the store to get a refund and such. Our pricing/sales system sometimes can get goofed up by certain things. The most common thing is a sale on an item is being extended into the next month. That setup will wipe out the current month's sale price and cause an overcharge. Luckily, it's only on a few brands, so we can quickly discover it and correct it. And I would say 95% of our customers realize things like this happen and will come back, only ask for the adjustment, and we have a good laugh. But we have one customer, Charles, who likes to game the system. He will deliberately seek out these errors and then try to claim the scan law to get money. He earned a permanent place on my crap list because he took advantage of me, another manager, and one of my favorite employees to get a $15 item for $5. Every time I have seen him in the store, he has always tried this crap. I usually try to avoid him because he may anger me with his comments to the point I will mention his aforementioned scam. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago I could not avoid having to ring this guy up. Here is where the malicious compliance came in. A month prior I had to look up the scan law because of a different customer's irate wife calling me and yelling that we did not just hand her husband $5. You have to claim the law. He did not, but I later discovered he was not eligible for it anyways. I also took note that anything the cashier manually types in is also not eligible. I tucked that little piece of information away. So when this guy came through my checkout, I made up some excuse about the scanner being twitchy, and I proceeded to hand type in every single UPC that this guy had. And he had at least 20 to 30 items. I made sure that I moved every item well over the scanner so that it didn't register any item. So this guy's order was 100% manual. I then asked him, does everything look correct? As one of the other managers advised everyone to do if they deal with him. He said yes, and then he paid. He was at the service desk not even a minute later talking to one of the senior managers. I got closer so I could eavesdrop, hoping he was pointing out to her that I had overcharged him for several items and how he wanted $5 for every single one. I was sad to find out he was actually referring to another receipt. After he left, I told the senior manager what I had done and how I really wanted to chime in and tell him, well, unfortunately, you're not entitled to anything but the difference, seeing as no scanning was involved. The senior manager just about pulled a muscle and she was laughing so hard. But my tip was given to all the cashiers. I have only seen him in the store once since then, and I hope to see him a lot less. I believe in showing up for jury duty. I believe that it's important for everyone to serve if they can, because trial by jury is one of the bedrock principles of civilized society. It's a duty everyone should do at least once. I don't have a problem with being on a jury. I do have a problem with plaintiffs and lawyers who waste the jury's time. I was on a jury for a civil case. While a civil case is less likely to expose you to gruesome crime scene photos you can never unsee, it will very likely devour weeks of your life, especially if the people involved have more money than sense. That was the case with my trial. Two rich idiots and former business partners were suing each other over a contract dispute that could have been settled in an afternoon. Idiot A was owed $300K over a land deal and Idiot B wouldn't pay. Idiot B wasn't paying because he accused Idiot A of misuse of business funds and all sorts of sleazy behavior. Both of them wanted the other guy to fork over lots of money in damages, and the trial lasted 3 weeks as their lawyers dug everything out trying to play on the jury's sympathies. This included one tearful witness who had to frequently pause because she was just so upset. The jury stopped being sympathetic in the first week. You can imagine how we felt towards them after having spent 2 more weeks listening to those morons argue. I was especially annoyed because not only did this take up the entirety of a beautiful 2 weeks off I'd expected to spend relaxing, it then played into what was supposed to be my first week back at work. Again, this could have been settled in an afternoon. However, the reason for this excessive court time became clear at the end of the trial when each side's lawyers began making the case for the money they felt they deserved. Each side tried to play on our sympathies for damages, money paid out in addition to the actual amount contested. Finally, the lawyers made the case for the awarding of lawyers' fees. Basically, how it works is that if certain conditions are met, one side can ask the other side to foot the legal bill. If I sue you, and it's established that I had a good enough reason to sue, you can be on the hook for my legal fees. That's what both sides were trying to do, and that's when it became clear why 3 weeks of my life were wasted. This whole trial was an attempt to justify the awarding of massive legal fees. Idiot A, who was suing for $300K, owed over $1.2 million in legal costs. So even if he won, he was still out $900K. Idiot B legal costs were about $700K, again far exceeding the money he owed Idiot A. That's why neither side settled. They owed too much money to their lawyers and were gambling that the jury would see it their way and make the other guy pay those bills. This is where the malicious compliance came into play. As a jury member, I took my oath seriously and made sure I followed the rules. We all did. So when we analyzed the case, we made sure to be as fair as possible. For instance, it became clear that while Idiot 1 was a sleazy idiot, he indeed had a contract that stipulated that Idiot B should have paid him $300K. So we ruled that Idiot A was owed $300K. However, we also decided that this was all he was owed. We awarded no damages whatsoever because it was also clear he was a sleazy idiot and had been abusing his position. For Idiot B, since he should have paid Idiot A, we also awarded no damages despite it being clear that Idiot A was indeed sleazy. Contract says pay, you pay, and don't be an idiot. Now we, the jury, determined that both sides did just enough wrong to establish that they were entitled to those legal fees. They met the legal requirements, so we discussed the legal fees they were owed. So we decided that yes, each side would be awarded legal fees. In fact, they would be awarded the same exact amount, $400K. But since both sides were awarded that amount, it really meant that they got nothing and were thus responsible for paying their own legal fees. I have to admit, I enjoyed the reading of the verdict. So there you have it. Idiot A got his $300K but owed $1.2 million in legal fees. Idiot B not only had to fork over the $300K, he also had to pay an additional $700K in legal fees. Like I said, people with more money than sense, except in the end, they had less money. It all started when I moved into my new house a couple of years ago. It was a quaint little place surrounded by lush greenery and a small but charming shed at the back of the property. The shed was one of the reasons I fell in love with the place. It was perfect for my woodworking hobby, a peaceful retreat where I could spend hours without disturbance, or so I thought. My neighbor, who I will refer to as the entitled neighbor, didn't waste any time making his presence felt. On the very first day, as I was unloading boxes, he sauntered over, a can of beer in hand, and without so much as a welcome to the neighborhood, he launched into a tirade about property lines. "You know, that shed you've got there is actually on my property," he claimed, pointing in my beloved retreat, with a smug look on his face. I was taken aback, not just by his audacity, but by the absurdity of the claim. I had meticulously checked the property lines before purchasing the house, and the shed was well within my boundaries. I tried to explain this to him, even offered to show him the documents, but he just waved me off. "That's not what the previous owner told me," he retorted, clearly not interested in the truth. From that day on, things went downhill. The entitled neighbor found every possible way to make my life difficult. He would throw trash over the fence, play loud music at all hours of the night, and let his dog do its business on my lawn. Each time I confronted him, he'd bring up the shed, insisting that it was his and that he was just waiting for the right moment to claim it. I tried to be patient, hoping he would come to his senses, but that day never came. Instead, things escalated to a level I never imagined possible. One morning, I was jolted awake by a loud mechanical noise. It sounded like a chainsaw on steroids. I rushed to the window, and to my horror, I saw the entitled neighbor sitting atop an excavator, its metal claw poised menacingly above my shed. I couldn't believe my eyes. This man had actually brought heavy machinery to my doorstep, intending to tear down my shed because he thought it belonged to him. Adrenaline pumping, I grabbed my shotgun and I stormed outside, my heart racing but my resolve firm. "Get down from there," I shouted, aiming the shotgun at him. The entitled neighbor looked stunned, his arrogance replaced by fear as he realized I was serious. "I am not messing around. Get off the excavator. Put your hands behind your head and lay on your stomach in the dirt," I commanded. To his credit, he complied. There he was, the man who had made my life a living nightmare, lying face down in the dirt, waiting for the police to come and collect him. When the cops arrived, I explained the situation, showed them the property documents, and recounted the series of events leading up to this moment. The entitled neighbor tried to spin a tale of misunderstanding and misplaced entitlement, but the evidence was clear as day. In the end, he was charged with trespassing and destruction of property. The court ordered him to pay for any damages and to keep a distance from my property. As for the shed, it remained standing, a bit more weathered but undefeated, much like myself. So, to anyone facing their own entitled neighbor, remember, boundaries, both physical and metaphorical, are worth defending. And sometimes it takes more than a polite conversation to protect what's yours. Edit. To all the people asking how he could operate an excavator, well, it's actually his job. And he was fired and sued for hijacking the excavator off the site he was working at. He had other accomplices too, and all ended up being fired and sued. Years ago, shortly after I moved out, my dad decided he wanted to remodel his bathroom and hired a local contractor, who I will refer to as DB, to do it. He fixed the clogged sink for him once. From the start, my dad was extremely skeptical of contractors and did not want to get scammed. So after they agreed on a price for labor, my dad asked him for an invoice for the cost of all the materials. He took said invoice to one of his co-workers, whose brother-in-law was a plumber or in construction or something, to look over the list of materials and see if the quote was fair. And right off the bat, DB was trying to do close to a 50% markup on the materials. So instead of paying DB's invoice, my dad just bought all the materials himself, saying he knows a guy who gives him amazing discounts. So DB doesn't get suspicious that my dad was onto his game. After 3 months, the bathroom is not close to being done, despite DB telling him it would take 2 months. My dad had to travel for work and would be gone in a week, so he asked me to house sit / make sure DB shows up to work and doesn't steal crap. Right off the bat, DB tries to be all buddy-buddy with me, but I did not like that guy and just brushed him off, asking how the bathroom was coming. Over the course of the week, DB tried to upsell me on a bunch of things he said needed to be done to finish the bathroom. Most of it was electrical work, which he did not have a license for. My dad filled me in before he left about what was quoted in the labor, and there was no electrical work quoted. Then I told him just to stick to the original quote. Once my dad came back, I filled him in on all the additional charges DB tried to tack on. He also did not show up for 3 days, saying he hurt his shoulder tripping over his cat. Then he tried to install the new ceiling light, which he was not asked to install because he had an electrician coming to install it. After a heated discussion between DB and I, he stopped installing the ceiling light and started laying tile, during which he broke a quarter of the tiles. After this debacle, my dad did some investigating and looked up DB's license and found out that not only was the license expired, it did not belong to DB. So my dad asked my brother and I to come over when he was going to confront DB about lying about his license. A very heated argument broke out when my dad refused to let DB enter the house to collect his tools and said we will bring the tools out to him. DB then threatened to press charges against me for assault when I accidentally brushed his shoulder when I was passing by him in the hallway, and I refused to apologize. After the cops showed up, DB quickly tried to play the victim, but the cops told DB to collect his tools and leave. The bathroom was still unfinished, but my dad did not have to pay DB for his 3 months of labor and used that money to hire real contractors to finish the bathroom. It only took them a week and a half to finish. After this, my dad contacted the local news to tell them about DB being a conman. A few months later, the news did an investigative story about him and they found other people DB scammed, where DB would start to work on their bathroom, but once he got paid, he would cut and run, leaving the bathroom unfinished and stealing all the materials. The news then set up a sting for DB and exposed him for being a conman, and he was arrested not long after the news story aired.